What's going on, guys? Pat here, and in today's video we are going to be discussing my top 5 favorite mods that I've done to my Oldsmobile. So in the 10 plus years that we've been restoring and modifying this car, there's been a lot of different setup changes, a lot of different mods, a lot of different parts, things of that nature. And honestly, different parts have reacted in different ways with the car. Certain parts have exceeded expectations, certain parts have kind of been what we expected, and certain mods have been just outright letdowns. So I just wanted to put together a quick top 5 list that out of all the changes we've made to the car, either restorative or modifying, are my favorite. They may not be the most expensive or the flashiest or most impactful, but out of all the mods that we've done, these are the top 5 that I've had the most enjoyment out of since we put on the car. So let's get into the list.
Alright, so starting off at number 5 here on the list is going to be the Serpentine belt kit that I put on the car. Now, one thing I knew I was going to have to address before I ever even hoped of autocrossing this thing was getting rid of its tendency to want to toss belts at higher RPMs, pretty much anything over 4,500. This thing would just want to throw belts left and right. I would be losing, I believe it was the power steering belt first, and then would wipe off the alternator belt, and then I would just have nothing. No cooling, no steering, no charging, and it was pretty frustrating. I knew that's something I couldn't have happening if I wanted to autocross the car regularly. So we decided to switch over to a CVF Racing Serpentine belt kit. This kit has been nothing but great since we've put it on the car. I've had no throwing belt issues, and there's other benefits beyond just the better design versus the V-belt system. Notably, this lets you upgrade the power steering pump to a GM Type 2 pump, which is what's found on a lot of LS powered cars and I believe cars that have been built since the 90s, but it may be certain 80s cars too. You can see my turn 1 pump on there. Now, this is a pump I would have never been able to use on a factory V-belt setup because no one makes Type 2 conversion kits for Oldsmobile engines. I would have been stuck with a Saginaw pump. So it's little things like that where, yeah, I get the reliability of not tossing belts, but I also get the other added benefits of a nice black anodized finish. I get to run a little better alternator style. I get a wider selection of alternators. I get a better selection of power steering pumps. So all those little things add up into something that I've been very happy with and has been well worth the money in my opinion.
Now, number 4 on my list is going to be upgrading to racing style bucket seats. These aren't full race style with like the halos around the head or anything, but much better than any factory seat ever could be, and it's completely transformed the driving experience of the car. Now, originally this was a factory bench car, which is very comfortable, and if it was a cruiser that would have been nice, but it doesn't really feel performance oriented, and nor does it do a great job of holding you in place. And originally we had upgraded the factory bench to a factory style bucket seat, which, you know, gave it more of like a performance car feel. But once we started getting into doing handling stuff with this car, whether it be cruising around back roads that are twisty or wanting to get into the road course and autocross stuff like we're doing now, the flat bucket seat just wasn't going to cut it. Seats are very comfortable, but they're terrible at holding you in place. So that's when we originally made the move over to the Corbeau CR1, which you can see over in the passenger seat. And even just going to that, which is sort of a hybrid between a track-oriented seat and a street seat, because it's very well bolstered, but also very well padded and reclined. So it's a nice middle ground between the two. That completely transformed the car. It felt so much better. I felt kind of, I don't know, much more intertwined with the car. I wasn't flopping around and along for the ride. I felt attached and like I was in control, which is a big deal. Having good seating position and feeling like you're strapped in and secure is a huge thing from a confidence standpoint, but also performance standpoint. You don't want to feel like you're flopping around, and it's a lot easier to drive and push yourself in the car if you're not flopping around like a ragdoll on the inside. I guess hand in hand with that goes the harnesses. Those do a fantastic job of holding you in place, but you know, they go hand in hand. The seats work extremely well with the harnesses, and the harnesses work extremely well with the seats. If I was missing one of these, it wouldn't be nearly as great as it is now. If you're building a pro touring car and you're going to do any kind of performance driving with it, whether it be aggressive back road cruising or autocrossing, I highly recommend doing some kind of bolstered seat. It will completely transform how you feel while you're driving, and really there's no downside aside from they don't really look like they fit in the car. Alright, so number 3 on my list is going to be sort of a jumbled up pair. It's going to be switching over to the Holley fuel injection system, which we're currently running the Sniper on this car, as well as switching over to the Holley electronic dashes that go hand in hand with the EFI system. Now, when we had the Quadrajet on here, it ran fine. It was okay, but there were still the nuances of a carburetor. Didn't really like to start when it was cold, didn't really like to start when it was hot, and I mean, there's just a lot of benefits you get from going to a fuel injection system, even a basic throttle body setup like this. It always starts, it bump key, there's no fighting with it, there's no pumping it, there's no worrying about flooding it. The throttle response is incredible everywhere. It follows the AFR across the range and it's adjusting in real time, which you can't get with a carburetor. And so all those benefits are just great. It's much more responsive and just eliminates a lot of the hassle that you get with a carburetor. Sure, you can get great performance with a well-tuned carburetor, but there's a reason you see a lot of pro touring cars running either throttle body or multi-port injection systems. They just have a lot of benefits when it comes to tuning and data analysis that you just can't get with a carburetor. And so with that are the Holley digital dashes. Now I run the 3.5-inch handheld, which controls the Sniper unit, which you can do all the tuning on, but also their 6.86-inch digital dash that's an add-on. So I can monitor a lot of the stuff that the Sniper is doing, but I also can do a GPS-based speedometer, and I can add on additional things like oil pressure that the Sniper doesn't control. So the flexibility of these, where you can change the gauge layout or change what inputs or outputs are on the screen, or do things like digital switches, make this super flexible, and it's just a great thing to have. I know no matter what engine setup I run in this car, or what combination, or what I want to do, I can monitor whatever I want to, and I can control whatever I want to as well. It gives me indicators if I want to know if my turn signals are on, if I want to know if my fans are on, things like that. And so that flexibility is incredible. Sure, it doesn't look as cool as like a vintage set of gauges in here would, but the flexibility of what you can monitor and do things like data log with these, it's just unmatched, and it's been one of my favorite things I've done to the car. It gives me so much insight into what's going on that I really wouldn't be able to get any other way. Alright, so number 2 on my list is going to be aftermarket suspension. Now, given the fact it's a pro touring car, it's kind of bound to have aftermarket suspension on it. I don't think there's such a thing as a pro touring car that's on stock suspension, but I really can't put into words how much going to a good, well-designed aftermarket suspension system will transform a classic muscle car. These cars from the factory on stock suspensions have inherent geometry issues on the front, where they gain positive camber as the suspension compresses that lead these things to handle incredibly poorly, which is what a lot of people think who aren't involved in muscle cars, that they just can't handle. And honestly, from the factory, that's completely true and a justified thing to say. So going to, in the front especially, an aftermarket control arm setup is hands down one of my favorite mods that we've done, and hands down one of the most important mods I would recommend to anybody who's building a pro touring car or a car they're going to drive often. Going to aftermarket suspension setup will fix these geometry issues, and it leaves you feeling like you're driving a totally different car than what you had before you put them on. Now, the suspension setup I have in the front is the UMI Performance Corner Max kit. I've talked more about that in other videos, so I would recommend checking out my current setup on the Oldsmobile video if you want to learn more about that suspension system. And in the rear, I'm running the UMI tubular control arms. Now, rear control arms aren't nearly as impactful. They are more rigid than the factory stamped ones, but the change isn't nearly as drastic as when you upgrade the front. So this has been one of my favorite things I've done. This thing feels great in the corners. It literally is as confidence inspiring as my E92 M3 is to drive. And for the money, is it the cheapest mod? No, but the transformation you get versus dollar spent is incredible. It's really transformed the car, and I can't say enough good things about it. Going to a good coilover setup, a good control arm setup, it wakes these chassis up so much, and it starts showing you the other shortcomings where they need to be made more rigid, and sometimes you'll find out your car's underpowered once you can make it handle well. So from a handling perspective, front control arms, uppers and lowers, I did them at the same time, and I would recommend changing them both out. Yeah, it's been such a fantastic thing to do, and really that kind of set the course for what this car became. Alright, so here we are with number 1 on the list, and my number 1 favorite mod that I've done is actually one of the more recent mods, and that's the T56 swap. All these other mods have impacted the car in a pretty big way, whether it be making it more reliable, handle better, or just feel better to drive, but in my opinion, none have impacted the driving experience of this car nearly as much as doing the 6-speed manual swap. Ever since I've owned this car, it's always been an automatic, and old school automatics aren't the best. They're good for certain things like drag racing, but
on the street and when you're building an autocross car, really not ideal. And especially if you're gonna drive the car a lot, not having overdrive is really not a big help. So going to do the stick, I wasn't really sure how it was going to be going into. I've heard everybody raves about doing T56 swaps, and everybody says they're worth the money and the hassle and that it completely transforms the car, but I had no experience driving a T56 car or being in someone else's Pro Touring car, so I didn't know how it was going to go going into it. And honestly, within the first 10 miles I took it out of my neighborhood, I was sold, and I felt that it was well worth the time and the money to do. You know, it's a lot of fun to drive. Obviously, everybody says manuals are more fun to drive, which I would say it depends. It can be a lot of fun driving a sequential or dual clutch car, but it's a lot better having this in here than just the 3-speed automatic, that's for sure. The gear ratios are great. You get the benefit of a double overdrive, so although I don't take this on the highway much, when I do, whether it be to go to a show or an event or just go for a cruise, it's way better. It's way more manageable. This thing will do 85 miles an hour and turn like 2,700 RPMs. It's crazy, and that's with a 373 in the back. You know, this car used to be spending $4,000 doing that when it had the automatic in it, and you know, it feels like a totally different car. It felt a little strange at first because I was getting used to driving a stick. I'd never owned a stick car before I did this swap in this car, and you know, it wasn't too hard to get a hold of, and it's just been fantastic ever since I did that. It's just so much fun to drive. It's a lot better to drive from I guess economic standpoint, where it's spinning way lower RPMs. It's way more practical to drive longer distances, and it's just a blast. It's just been so much fun. It's fun to row the gears, even if I'm just putting around town and cruising and short shifting. It's just a lot of fun. It's fun to downshift. It's great. It's better suited to what I want to do from an autocross and road racing standpoint than the automatic was. Is this as good as like a dual clutch or a sequential on the track? Absolutely not, but this is much better than having a TH400 in here for what I want to do with the car. So hands down, this has been my favorite thing I've done to the car. There may be mods in the future that I will do that, you know, may dethrone this as my favorite mod, but you know, thus far in the 10 years we've been working on this thing, this has been my favorite, hands down. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Nothing really too crazy with this one. I just wanted to put together a short video going over my 5 favorite mods. You know, there's some ones I left out, like the 315 squared setup or doing a big block swap, where it's kind of obvious that that's a cool mod that I enjoyed, but those weren't necessarily as impactful in my opinion as some of these other mods were. You know, the 315 squared setup looks really cool, and theoretically the car will perform a lot better, but in my opinion, from a driving standpoint, there's been a lot bigger impact with like something like the Serpentine kit, where I don't have to worry about tossing belts anymore or doing the manual swap and etc. So yeah, it's just I hope you guys enjoyed. You know, if you guys have any favorite mods that you've done to your car or you've seen on this car, feel free to comment below. You know, I want to hear what you guys think. What are your favorite mods that you've seen on this car, or what are some mods that you would like to see on this car? So hope you guys enjoyed. Feel free to leave a like if you did, and subscribe if you want to see more. I'll see you guys in the next one.